Hello, and welcome to Popcorn News, something to watch while you eat popcorn. Do not try to comprehend it all. Nay, just eat the popcorn. In the previous Popcorn News, I discussed the temptation combats. This is something more than just mere temptation. Sure, we all have temptations to write some fib maybe, or cheat on a test, or do some shoplifting. These kind of temptations happen to us all, and we either resist them or we are overcome by them and subsequently feel guilt and conscience. But those are just more or less ordinary temptations. The temptation combats are something more ferocious, and the best way I can think to describe them is to read the book of Job in the Old Testament, where Job, he wasn't tempted to go steal some sheep or whatever. He was just totally assailed. The Almighty, for inscrutable reasons, withdrew protection from Job, and the demons were free to attack at will. I'm not saying my own experience was as bad as Job's, but I'm just saying that it was more than just temptation. When I say temptation combats, I mean a feeling that the angels have withdrawn their protection. And according to Emanuel Swedenborg, each of us has got two angels always with us who protect us against the demons who are always wanting to attack and have utter hatred for us. But at any rate, here is from an excerpt from the previous Popcorn News, which was titled Temptation Combats. Each of us have got two good angels always with us. But there's also two evil demons trying to get at us. But usually the two angels protect us. But there's times when the Almighty, however you wish to name the Almighty, is Yahweh or Allah or God, whichever. I'm not trying to convert anybody here. I'm just saying this is my take on things, how my perception, how I perceive. But so the two angels are always protecting you, but the two demons filled with just utter hatred of you are always trying to get at you. And from time to time, the Almighty allows the two demons to attack, and this is for your growth. The temptation combats, they were pretty bad. I'd say they were about the third such temptation combat I've experienced in my life. This third one was not as severe as the first, which was the most severe. The second was severe, but not as bad as the first. But this third was, I'd say it was still classified as a temptation combat, and I'll go into that further. But before that, here's some notes from Emanuel Swedenborg in his book Arcana Coelestia, a multi-volume work. In Arcana Coelestia is Latin, and I give it the literal translation, Secrets of Heaven, but usually it's translated as Heavenly Secrets. So anyway, here's a few notes from the Arcana Coelestia about temptation combats. This is from Arcana Coelestia, Secrets of Heaven. I believe it's section 9930, towards the end of the multi-volume work. As the good of wisdom is acquired by means of temptation combats. Let me get this a little larger here. There, from section 751, there are two kinds of temptations. One as to things of the understanding, the other as to those of the will. When a man is tempted as to things of the understanding, the evil spirits call up only the evil things he has been guilty of and accuse and condemn him. But this temptation is light and is perceived only by the recalling of such things to mind and a certain anxiety therefrom. But when a man is tempted as to the things of the will, his thoughts and doings are not so much called up, but there are evil genies, as evil spirits of this kind may be called, who inflame him with their cupidities and foul loves, with which he is also imbued, and thus combat by means of the man's cupidities. For in a moment they infuse themselves. That spiritual temptation of man is a combat of the evil spirits with the angels who are with him. And this combat is commonly felt in his conscience. The angels continually protect man and avert the evils which evil spirits endeavor to do to him. But spiritual temptations are little known at this day. Not like in days of yore, like in the book of Job, which tells of an extreme temptation combat. The spiritual temptation is a little known at this day, nor are they permitted to such a degree as formerly, because man is not in the truth of faith and would succumb. In place of these temptations there are others, such as misfortunes, griefs, and anxieties arising from natural and bodily causes, and also sicknesses and diseases of the body, which in a measure subdue and break up the life of man's pleasures and cupidities, and determine and uplift his thoughts to interior and religious subjects. The temptation combats, they are horrific, but I associate these three temptation combats that I have had with the death of a family member. And for this reason, well, back in 1998, my father died. So that was temptation combat number one. In 2004, my mother died, and that coincided with temptation combat number two. And in 2016, my sister died, but in that case, the temptation combats didn't occur until recently, in the past month or so, in 2018. But in the case of my sister, she had been cremated, so I'll get into that, because my mom and dad were buried, but my sister was cremated, and that may be why the third of the temptation combats was delayed. At any rate, in this, there's a book by Zora Neale Hurston. Actually, it's several of her books, and it's combined in a Library of America volume. But the first one, Mules and Men, is in two parts. The first part, in the 1930s, she traveled to Florida to do anthropological work studying African American folklore. And in part two, she went to New Orleans in the 1930s to do more anthropological studies of voodoo. And voodoo, she says, is actually should be called hoodoo, Hoodoo, but for some reason it's misunderstood and people typically call it voodoo, but according to her it's actually hoodoo. So something jumped out at me in part two of Mules and Men, chapter 5, Hoodoo. All over the South and in the Bahamas, the spirits of the dead have great power, which is used chiefly to harm. So that jumped out at me, and it caused me to make the connection between the temptation combats and the deaths in the family. Let me read it again. All over the South and in the Bahamas, the spirits of the dead have great power, which is used chiefly to harm. And it's, in the primitive cultures, there's this thing where they placate the dead by going to their graves and placing food and libations on the grave, and this is supposed to appease the spirit of the dead. In this, I find an echo of this in the custom of putting flowers onto graves. Again, it's to appease the spirit of the dead. With my father and mother, they were buried, and so this caused their spirits had the ability to roam immediately. But in the case of my sister, who was cremated, that may have delayed the roaming of the spirit. And in all three cases, I did not placate the spirits of the dead. I did not leave flowers at my parents' grave because, just far away. And I just, what's the sense of it? They're dead. But I didn't understand that you want to leave flowers at the grave to placate the spirits of the recently departed. In my sister's case, she was cremated and her ashes were buried in Texas. And it's a long way to go, and again, it's like I didn't see the sense of it. Putting flowers there is not going to bring her back. But I didn't understand that it's to placate the spirits of the dead. And so that's where I get the title for this video, the temptation combats of the dead. That the temptation combats, at least in my experience, have something to do with the recently dead family members. And this is Memorial Day, and a lot of people leave flowers on the graves of the soldiers. And this began, in my understanding, it began around the end of the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln, after he was assassinated, they put him on a train, his remains on a train, and they slowly traveled to various cities on their way back to Springfield, Illinois for the burial. In each of the cities, the train would stop, and they'd take the remains of Lincoln and put him in state in one of the big buildings in whatever city. And there was an outpouring of flowers. There was just enormous flowers, and there were so many flowers that they had to rotate the flowers. That say Lincoln would be in, say, New York City, and they'd bring in a bunch of flowers, and they'd leave them there for about an hour, but there were so many flowers lined up from other people that they just kept rotating in flowers. And also around this time, the families of the Civil War veterans, on their own, without the government making it some kind of holiday, just on their own, towards the end of May, they would get in the habit of going to the graves of their family members who had died in the Civil War and leaving flowers. So this is how Memorial Day, the custom to leave flowers on the graves, developed. And so now it is Sunday, the day before Memorial Day, or 2018, and some people, sure, they're leaving the flowers on the graves of the veterans, but some are off Indianapolis 500 or kayaking down rivers and whatnot. But it's important to remember and placate the spirits of the departed. Otherwise, if there's not enough flowers left on the graves, I fear that the spirits of these slain soldiers could inflict the United States with the temptation combats.